Good evening, everyone. Today is Wednesday, June 28th. 7:30, we're going to do the pledge and go into our meeting. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Exciting agenda tonight. First, do we have any announcements for the public? Okay, don't all jump in at once. It's all good. Wishing everyone a wonderful July 4th weekend. I'm guessing it's going to be an especially long one since it's on Tuesday this year. And that means Monday, a lot of people are going to take off. There's lots of fun stuff. Fireworks are happening on the waterfront on the 3rd. And there are just so many events. It's in my mayor's message. I think another one went out today, right? Later this afternoon. There was a correction that needed to be made on, there were a lot of events and it's under the, okay, mark your calendar section. And a few of the events just had wrong dates, etc. So you got one this afternoon and there was so much information on the website, on from the town, from the village, from the library. Just really stay tuned because, as you know, this place, our village is hopping all through the summer, especially on July 4th weekend. So I think for me, that is the announcements, and we have a very interesting agenda, a little different than our usual. So looking forward to learning a lot tonight. And I do want to welcome Supervisor Feldman, who is not always here. But tonight she's with us, at least, who knows, maybe she'll be so thrilled to be here, she'll stay for the whole evening. And there is no meeting next week for those of you that are following us. All right, village manager. What happened? There is a special meeting. I'm sorry. Oh, you're right. I have to announce that. There is, I don't know the time though, because we kept going back and forth. Okay, we have a special meeting on a Thursday at 9 a.m. And it's, well, that's the announcement for the meeting. It will be a very short meeting. Thank you all. Jumped right on there. I like it. Okay, village manager.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor. First on our agenda, we'll be talking about the Length of Service Awards Program, also known as LOSAP. And here tonight, we have Michael Aurora representing the Ossining Fire Department. So welcome, Mr. Aurora.
Thank you. No,
Hello,
no-
sir.
Hello, good evening. No pressure,
Not on our part.
not at all. Mayor, trustees, everyone else, thank you for your time tonight. The chiefs send their regards. They had a previous engagement and we didn't want to delay this matter. So LOSAP, I guess I should start with what LOSAP is.
Well, you should start with introducing yourself. Actually, most of this, just so you know, we record everything. I'm sure
Yes.
you've done a lot of these. So we find that many people look at this 6 months from now, 3 months from now, sometimes the media. So here are a couple of tips. You can sit, you don't have to stand, whatever makes you comfortable. Speak right into the mic. And if you have people with you that you just want to introduce by name into the record, where they're from, whatever, if you have titles, it's just helpful. And I do want to point out that Trustee Fritchie, who is involved with the fire department, stepped off the two long tables, better known as the dais, I guess, to be in the audience and not actually partake in this part of the conversation. And again, welcome, and don't look so nervous. It's okay.
I'm usually not nervous. I'll loosen up. Michael Aurora, a lifetime resident of the village, 20-year member of the fire department, went through all the ranks. With us tonight in the audience is John and Freddie. They're both active members. Freddie is the deputy chief, went through the ranks as a chief. And as I mentioned, the chiefs regret not being able to be here, but they have a prior engagement. So LOSAP, Length of Service Award Program. It's, if you could just go to the next slide for me, please. The Ossining Fire Department has been working on a LOSAP program with a committee we formed probably for some years, but really got into it about 8 months ago. On that committee are everybody listed up there. Dan Farrell is the chair, co-chair Matt Scarduzio, Michael Aurora, myself, the liaison, Secretary Chris Kavanaugh, and then there you see each company has a delegate and a backup delegate. We formed a committee so we could get to know everything that we needed to know about LoSAP. If you could go to the next slide. This is what we'll be covering today. We kind of trimmed it down a little. There's a lot of information in the original presentation, but due to time constraints, I want to make sure we just get to understand what LoSAP is and why we feel we should have it. If you can go to the next slide. What are LoSAP plans? So LoSAP plans are like a retirement plan. There's two different types. There's a defined benefit plan. A defined benefit plan is a monthly benefit for life designated at entitlement age anywhere between 55 and 65. Range of accruals can range between $10 per month for each year to $30 per month for each year, as allowed by law. $20 per month for each year is what the most common program is being implemented around. Although a lot of departments are now increasing because they've had the program for some years now. Range of years of service between 20 years to 50 years with an assumed start age at 20 years old. 40 years is the most common. We haven't seen anybody really changing that. Defined contribution plan. That is a lump sum paid at entitlement age, anywhere between 55 and 70, like a 401k. It varies. Range of accruals from 700 for each year to 1,200 for each year, allowed by law. Range of years of service is the same, 20 years to 50 years, with the assumed start age at 20 years old, and with a 40-year span is the most common for the program. Do we want to do questions all at the end or per slide?
I think the way you have this set up, it's best, because just so the public also knows, we received this yesterday, the longer version.
Yeah.
I'm sure that given that most of us work, we haven't had the chance to go in depth. I can't speak for everybody, but I think most. So I would go through the presentation, and then Jamie, who's managing this, can always go back to a slide if we have to. That way we'll at least hear the whole story, and then there are going to be a lot of questions. It's
Absolutely.
very new to I think, all of us, maybe just most of us, but it's all new to us.
Understandable. The question and answer to the nook of it.
I appreciate that.
Yep. If we could go to the next slide, please. What are LoSAP points? New York State has created a municipal law outlining the specifications for LoSAP plans. The law states that 50 points must be earned by a volunteer in a calendar year in order to receive credit for that year. The point system includes activities such as training and drills, elected and appointed positions, meetings and committees, response to calls, and more. Next slide, please. Very small, but I know it by the top of my head. So
Okay.
this is a sample plan that was outlined by the state of New York when they designed LoSAP. These are the maximum amount of points in each category. You can't go over those category points, but you can reduce them based on each department and how they want to cater their LoSAP plans. Each category does not have to be included except military leave and sick leave. And there's one other, I can't see the bottom right now, but it's in my notes. Any other category does not have to be included if we don't want to. Next slide, please.
Yeah, she can zoom in if you ask her to.
It's all right, because we're going to get, the next slides actually break down each one of those categories.
Okay.
So what the Ossining LoSAP Fire Department Committee did was we went through those categories. The bulk of the point system is usually catered to each department. It's not generic across every department because every department and every municipality or agency is different. So for us, the law for the fire response, 25 points. 25 points is the max that you can get in a fire response. I'm not going to read it verbatim because, like I said, I have it in my head. So what that means is that your calls are defined based on a percentage that New York State law has outlined on your total overall calls for the previous year. So you can range from anywhere from 10%, depending on how many calls your department responds to, as low as 5%. We fall in the range of 7.5% because we average about 560 to 600 calls per year. So 7.5%. What that means is that if a firefighter goes to 1 call, 2 call, 3 calls, it's not a point for a call, it's towards the overall point. So based on last year, 51 calls would have been needed to achieve your 25 points in the fire response category. Those are the scenarios on the side that I just went over, so we can go to the next slide, please. These are all the subcategories. I'll breeze through them, but still be very efficient. The department line officers, you have point structures for becoming an officer. So when you become a line officer, the chief of the department, the first assistant chief, and the second assistant chief can get up to 25 points just for being a chief. However, this is the model that we've come up with that we think would be fair. 20 points is what the max we want to give to our chiefs. Department appointed officers, 15 points. Deputy chiefs, ex-chiefs, safety officers, training officers, fire prevention officers, radio officers, secretary for the association, and a LoSAP administrator, which would need to be created for the department. Those are department officers. If you can go to the next slide, please. Now we're on to company officers. As you know, we have 9 companies. So each company has officers, which could be captain and foreman, lieutenant and a first assistant and second assistant foreman, chief drivers, chief driver of the fast team, and team leaders as appointed by the chief. We elected to want to honor 10 points for them. Company elected officers are 10 points. Those are your presidents, vice presidents, treasurer, secretaries, financial secretary, treasurer, and LoSAP administrator per company. A few things about the officer categories: they can be combined if someone holds 2 titles, but not to max that category of 25 points. So the max for an officer category is 25 points. If somebody's a secretary and a first assistant, they would be able to get 10 and 10 for 20 points. Another sidebar to that is that if an officer is suspended for any reason during their 1-year term for more than 30 days, then they forfeit those points for the year. Next slide, please. Meetings are 20 points. Is the cap for that category. You could achieve way more than that based on fire department meetings. However, it's to try to entice people to come to their once-a-month meeting and go to their, other meetings. If they're an officer, there's association meetings and so on. Miscellaneous activities can be carved out. We've come up with the categories that we want. I have it on a sheet to share with you guys. That is 1 point per activity with a max of 15 points. Those activities can be anything from parades to picnics to basically morale and recruiting events and memorial services and stuff like that. Next slide, please. Standbys are 20 points. Standbys have 2 categories. There's an in-house standby, such as your snow standby and your emergency standby. It's to get the manpower to come to the firehouse. It's for safety. It's so you're not responding 5 or 6 or even 15 firefighters in the middle of a snowstorm to the fire. As you know, we hold standbys. That means right when the weather's about to get bad, we call everybody to the firehouse. They sleep there, they prepare there. So you can get points for being on a standby. That is duration driven. So you get a point for going to the standby, and then depending on how long that standby goes on and you are there, you can continue to get points if it becomes 4 hours, 8 hours, 16, and so on. Then there's mutual aid standbys when other departments, as you know, the fire service is big on mutual aid. That's how New York State runs a lot of fire service. So when we respond to other departments, just like other departments respond to us, there are standby points awarded to the teams that respond there to get manpower to go out and represent Ossining as a backup mutual aid department. Certified training, which is very big. We need to make sure that everybody's doing their trainings. You can cap at 25 points. Trainings are broken down just like curriculum. So it's based on how long that training class is. It's not that you can just sign up for a training class and get 5 points, 1 point. It's based on the curriculum and how long, and it must be an accredited certificate given training. So like your training academy, firefighter 1, and other monthly trainings. Next slide, please. Trying to watch my time. Drills are different than training. Drills are actual live drills that we conduct once a month at the minimum. Drills are 1 point per drill. Must be 2 hours in duration. There's a lot of state guidelines on it, obviously for checks and balances. Public education, our fire prevention, which we take very big pride in, 5 points for participating, up to 5 points for participating in fire prevention. So the firefighters who go to the schools and go to the nurseries, they get a point for showing up and teaching the fire prevention. Line of duty disability, this is state mandate. It cannot be altered. It's maximum 60 points. If you get hurt in the line of duty at a fire or a fire function, you're covered, so you don't forfeit that year or while you're out on injury. Next slide, please. This is where we're going to get into the nooks and crannies, I'm sure, of the roster and how we define the roster, the membership roster of the Ossining Fire Department. So the roster, we have on our roster 411 people on our Ossining Fire Department roster. There's members of the fire department, and then there's who LoSAP will deem qualifies. How we came to these numbers how we came to this conclusion of between 128 and 160 qualifying members is in February of 23. We had each department delegate work with their officers and their secretary to do a cleanup. I've called up here. We tried to get as many records as possible, and we tracked down dates of birth and everything like that. And then we ran it with our reporting system that we already have for a couple of years, which is emergency reporting, to run who would have made 10%, who would have made 7%. So a majority of these numbers are based solely on Firematic numbers, not members that may also be fully active but not making all the calls. So I just want to explain how we got to these numbers. So with that, we've come up with 96 members would have qualified based on our last 5 years audit on calls, on Firematic calls. 64 members show as possible, meaning they were on the cusp. They might have been okay for 5.5%, 6% and so on. And had there been maybe some other incentives or something else, or maybe there was something going on in their personal life that deemed them to dip for a few calls. So these rosters were based on Firematic responses. This does not, if someone is included, if we send our roster to the LoSAP administrator and we say it's 100 people, and at the end of the year, only 50 people qualified, we overfunded. That funding will go towards the next year's funding. We don't lose that money, and it reduces the next year's funding. It does not have anything to do with who's an active member of the fire department or anything like that. It's basically a pension plan, who qualified for their pension that year. If someone doesn't qualify for 2 consecutive years, their years prior are forfeited and they have to start over. If they leave town, if they move away, whatever. There are certain protections in the law, such as college, educational facilities, other things, military leave, as we discussed. Next slide, please. So this is an example of the 3 major well-known LoSAP plans out there. Defined contribution, age 65, based on 128 to 160 qualifying members, up to 5-year buyback if member qualifies in year 1. So I'll just touch on that real quick. So the law allows you, when you implement a LoSAP plan for the first year, to give the existing members a 5-year buyback if they qualify in year 1. So in other words, if we enact LoSAP in 2024, at the end of 2024, 50 people make their LoSAP points, and they've been in the department, and the audit shows that they would have made it the last 5 years, they will get 6 years after year 1. This plan would be a lump sum payout at age 65. The cost for this plan would be between $211,000 and $260,000 per year. That's with the 5-year buyback. Next slide, please.
I'm just gonna get
Yes.
point, that's per year, every year, forever.
No. That's per year. If we do the 5-year buyback, that's per year. The 5-year buyback is spread out for the first 10 years. So if you look at the bottom numbers there that are highlighted, if you look at without the buyback, that's how much it would cost after the buyback is done. The lower number there. The 5-year buyback is being funded for the first 10 years. When we get into a further slide, I can show you a little bit more. Sorry, did we move to the next slide? Yes, we did. Defined benefit, back one, sorry. Defined benefit, age 65, based on 128 to 160 qualifying members, up to 5-year buyback if the member qualifies in year 1. Monthly payments monthly benefits will be paid out at age 65. and the payment depends on how many years you qualify. This plan would cost between 320 and 388,000 a year. Next slide, please.
Again, I'm just going to ask for some clarity. Was all of these numbers were done by the committee or by our finance department?
By the committee.
Okay.
Well, just to clarify on that, so that all the numbers were received from 3 or 4 TPA, third-party administrators, people that oversee LoSAP. These sheets are presented from them, and we took, which you'll see at the end, we took the lowest of all 3 bids and the most credible. Defined benefit age 60. So as you lower the age, like any pension plan or retirement plan, obviously the cost goes up because you're paying out sooner. So this is the same exact benefit based on 120 to 160 qualifying members, up to 5-year buyback. If you qualify in the first year, monthly payments will begin at age 60 instead of 65. That brings the cost up between 390 to 480,000 a year. Next slide, please. So in all of the research that we've done, in all of the proposals and estimates that we received, and in doing a lot of research with neighboring departments, like-sized departments, a very, very similar like-sized department with 8 companies, and just doing a lot of research and working with the credible TPAs, we feel that the best plan that we would like to seek approval for is is the one that costs between 320 to 388,000. It's age 65. So we went with the highest age 65 to receive payout, receive credit for 40 years, meaning 20 years you're vested. After 5 years, you're vested, but 20 years is the program, and you can get an additional 20 post-entitlement years up to 40. The 5-year buyback, if the member qualifies for first year and passes the 5-year in the look back audit. $20 a month per year, up to 40 years, up to 10 years. This is very important too. Up to 10 years, and this is on all of the plans, up to 10 years can be transferred should the firefighter or the member pass away. So that can be transferred to a beneficiary, and they can get up to 10 years of their entitlement. So the numbers came up with, the difference between the 2 numbers are, if we go with 100% of the yeses when we talk about the roster and 50% of the maybes, that brings it to 320,000. If we go with 100% of the yeses and 100% of the maybes, that brings it to the higher amount of 388,000. And that is with the 5-year buyback. So after 10 years, I'll show you on one of the slides how that reduces significantly. However, there's more. Next slide, please. So with LoSAP, when it started in 1990, and a lot of our surrounding neighbors have it, obviously, like everything, it started out with pen and paper on how to track and accountability. Accountability is big in any organization, agency, or company, let alone, a life-saving organism. So with that, biometrics has formed. And what that is biometrics would be installed in every firehouse and on the apparatuses. That is a thumbprint biometric. So I can't go to a call, mark myself in, or tell somebody to mark me in for me. It's like taking attendance, right? It's like clocking in for a job. So the biometrics comes out, and most of the surrounding and neighboring departments have it, or if not, are implementing it now due to past audits. If you look at New York State's website. So this is just a little bit about the companies that we received proposals from. We received 3 proposals. If you want to go to the next slide, please. So to recap, the OFD proposal LoSAP plan that we feel we would like to move forward with is, again, everything is based on numbers, and it's a lot of
I'm sorry,
speculating.
I thought what I expected to see is the cost of that.
Yes, it's in here.
It's in here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. So the roster, with a roster of 128 to 160 members, 96 yeses, 64 maybes, defined benefit plan with entitlement age of 65, up to 5-year buyback for all first year qualifiers, $20 per month per year up to 40 years, a payout at age 65 between $400 and $800 a month. So what that means is that if a firefighter does 20 qualifying years at the $20 a month, they will start to receive at age 65, $400 a month for the rest of their life. If they continue their post entitlement every year that they go up until they max at 40 years, because we're talking about a 20-year-old member, hopefully joining and then going 40 years of their time, when they can get up to a maximum by law 800. The law has actually increased since now, and you can go up to as high as $30 a month with $1,200. With the anticipation, they're going to raise it to $50 a month allowable by law, just due to everything that's going on in the economy. So we tried to come right in the middle, and all of our research shows that this is what everyone else started with, and now most of our surrounding neighbors are going up to the $30 plan and $1,200. The very small print there at the bottom gets into the cost. The cost for the biometric is about $93,000, a one-time startup cost. That would be a biometrics device in every apparatus and in every firehouse, and all of the software, and in our headquarters, and all of the tracking capabilities. And then in addition to that, 74,000, which we would have to see how that would work, if that would be fit into this or whatever, because our firehouses don't have servers and any, it's not really doesn't really have an infrastructure. So I would imagine the IT department would want to handle that, but whatever way, it's about 74,000 to put a rack in every firehouse. All this is plug and play stuff. So should things change with firehouse locations and stuff like that, it can all be removed and moved. And then, so that, if you could zoom in on the grand scam total on the bottom right. So based on the first year, if we went with that plan, yes, I believe that is 545. Right. We'll go with 547, 546,000. That includes everything. And then as you see there, that would be year one because of the biometrics and the server infrastructure. And then year two decreases about that 100 grand for years 2 through 8. And then the final, once we get to year 10, it reduces significantly to the 200 and something thousand, 277, I believe. Next slide, please. Benefits of a LoSAP program: increased accountability. Accountability is very important. As you see, I've made some calls up here. The roster would be tight. We would know everything about every member. Increased efficiency on tracking of membership and rosters, increased manpower for call responses, increased interest in joining committees so you can be presidents, increased interest in becoming an officer, increased turnout for drills and trainings, increased overall retention, shows financial appreciation to members volunteering their time, provides additional incentives to other existing tax saving programs, increases additional e-learning. So with one of the TPAs that we selected, they also provide e-learning, accredited e-learning classes, so people can take more training and more knowledge to be more safe, additional recruitment benefits, and increased morale. I think that's the last slide, correct? Oh, next steps. So the next steps would be we're here to seek your approval and support to sponsor. So the way LoSAP works is that you have to sponsor LoSAP, put it to a referendum, so then it could be voted on. Once that takes place, once this decides to move forward, the fire department cannot change the plan. Nothing. Whatever we lock in, whatever we agree on, whatever gets voted on, the TPA and the wealth management companies, they work with all of us, but they answer to you. And if we want to change something like a lot of departments are doing now, we want to change the 65 to 60. We have to come back here again, ask to be sponsored, go back up to vote. So it's very important to try to get it as close to right as possible, but with, times changing all the time, that's very hard. But we spent 8 months on this right now, bi-weekly meetings, a lot of research, tons of emails, and we just feel that this would be the most fair and appreciative program, which is kind of right in the middle. Some of the programs came in as high as $885,000 and as low as 270, as you saw, if we talk about the variables that could be talked about. The variables that can affect the price, the roster. We can budget on 100 people, we could budget on 160 and 50 make it. We overfunded. In the way it was explained to me from the wealth management investors is that you won't see that impact directly next year, but the following year, I guess the way it works with investments, the amount that we need to contribute will go down because we will put that towards the buyback. So other factors are that control the amount is the 40-year span. Yes, I'm being very transparent because I want this to go through. We all want this to go through. You can reduce that to cap it at the 20 years, cap it at the 30 years. That will reduce the cost as well because now you're paying less. Also, the $20 could be reduced. No one's really under 20. But it can be reduced. Those are like your variables right there on where you can look to reduce the cost. I can't see the biometrics not being a factor, in my opinion, in all of the 8 months of research and probably dozens of calls daily to the companies. We would be setting ourselves up for failure in audits day one without some type of accountability. Plus, the biometrics does so much more than just aid in LoSAP. It can house all of our information, everything from records to training to you name it. And obviously, whoever has access on your end can run reports and do all that other stuff so we can all stay compliant and just move on it. But I'm sure you have some questions. I know there's a lot of
Yeah.
questions. If you want to ask a few, I have everything fresh in my head
Sure.
as best I
Why
can.
don't you grab a seat?
I'm used to standing, but sure.
Okay, and gentlemen, if you want to come up so we don't have to, there are seats up here. That way, or you want him to do all the talking. It's up to you. This is,
I'm the chosen one.
you're just that's a work session. It's not a legislative.
I know.
It's so a little bit less formal than, I'd like to start, usually the trustees go because I have some macro questions and I'm not sure. You don't have to answer everything. You could say something like, it's in that longer version and I'll read through it. It's just that I skimmed and I have been looking at what LoSAP is since I have not heard about this before. So just tell me if it's already in there, if it's been looked at, et cetera, okay? Well, somebody might want to say, hey, we need to go back to a previous. So I thank you for the presentation. Very nicely done. I see lots of really great stuff. I have been made aware, it's one of my learnings when I became a trustee, is that we have a very large volunteer fire department. I'll be honest with you, I still don't understand the definitions, active, inactive, many houses, departments. It's complicated. I'm not sure how important it is for this. I mean, you guys went into a lot of detail. I just want you to know that I myself, not speaking for anybody else, not sure about all the pieces, but these are some of the big questions I have. At the end, which I would have put as the first slide, is why you want this in the first place. Most people watching might say, oh, they just want to make some more money because, they're volunteers and they don't get paid. I think it's bigger than that. I mean, I think that the way I heard what you said is on behalf of many people is that there is an opportunity that the state of New York has put forth, that the state as a whole has a shortage of volunteer firefighters. In different parts of the state, the shortages are different and have a different negative effect. In some parts of New York State, they're paid fire departments. The firefighters, like police, are fully paid with pensions and all that. In Westchester County, as with everything, frankly, as I've learned, a little bit of both. And so I think LoSAP is an attempt to administratively equalize a few things. And that's the financial, which you spent a lot of time. But on the last page, I think is most important, which is why we put it up front, is why. What's the benefit to the taxpayers have to pay for this, right? And the benefit is that there is a decreasing interest, possibly, I don't know, but that's what I've been told. You can tell me otherwise. And you're trying to incentivize people to become volunteer firefighters. And even when they become volunteer firefighters, you're trying to find an incentive, amongst other things, that they become drivers or that they become whatever, that they go to meetings, because just being there may not be working as it did 20, 30, 40 years ago. And a village like ours or Port Chester or Peekskill have gotten bigger, more complicated. They're not just single family homes. You need more knowledge. We have different firehouses and the list goes on. And so in that, you want to say to people, we want you to become volunteers. If it comes from your soul, wonderful. But even if you think about it, here's another advantage in addition to all the great things, because I don't think a program like this, if I didn't want to become a volunteer firefighter, I don't think this is going to make me want to be a firefighter. This is not exactly a salary.
Correct.
So people should understand that's not a salary. It's more like if you've been with us for a long time, to retain you, to show you whatever. We already do lots of things for the firefighters. This would be one more thing that we would be doing. So I think that's, to me, I want to get clarity that that's actually the purpose.
Yes, absolutely.
And if there's more to it than that, this would be the time to say, I'd like to get the big picture. I'm
Absolutely.
repeating it back just so I understand your presentation, make sure that I'm calibrated.
Yes, you're actually spot on. So some of our statistics to show the decline in 2018 of those qualifying members, 59 people made the amount of calls. Now today in 2022, we're down to 43. That's a reduction of 17 in the past 17 members making firematic calls in the last 5 years. That's an average of 3 per year, with the calls increasing or staying steady between 1 and 3 calls a year. So our
It's a
calls,
20% reduction in the number of people that go out.
yeah.
Okay.
So you're spot on. I mean, it's not going to be the overall save all. Hey, we have LoSAP, come join our department, but we do have neighboring departments that have it, and we do have members that have hopped, have switched. And I do have letters from our chiefs in our neighboring departments and municipalities on how LoSAP has helped them when they implemented it to get retention, hands down. This is definitely a great retention tool. Recruitment, 25%. So if we can offset that 20% reduction with a 25% or 20%, maybe that'll offset the loss. But yes, you're spot on. I mean,
Okay, I want to calibrate why you're even pursuing this, that it's not just about money. Money is piece of it.
absolutely.
Secondly, I don't need the answer now. I think that the board should get this. I'd like to see the list of who you're comparing the percentage of fire departments in Westchester County
Yep.
that are paid, and the percent, are any of them paid? I don't even know.
The cities are
The
paid.
cities are,
yes.
right? So the paid, the unpaid, I don't know if you're going to be able to show data points. This isn't just for us to make a decision. Decisions we're making today, if I heard you correctly, we're going to lock into something and it's forever.
Correct.
I mean, anything to me over 30 years is forever. Okay, so we're locking in. And we have to lock in, as you actually said, and your words were correctly, right? Like
Correct.
you got to choose the right one because you don't get to change it.
Absolutely.
My guess is whatever legislative body's in charge of this, you can change everything, right? Almost everything in the United States. I mean, so I wouldn't go with that. It probably can be changed, but generally speaking, this board is being asked to lock in for all the future boards. That's a big responsibility to ask us to do. We can do a year, 2 years. That's the 5 of us. We talk, we're done. Have a nice day. Welcome. To lock our future legislative bodies forever, that's a big ask. It's not just you focused on money, but I do want to make it clear what you're actually asking this board to do and why we have to take it seriously. So I'd like to see a comparison. If they're using whatever system they were using, I do like to see letters are great.
Yep.
I'm just wondering what chief would say, hell no, this doesn't work. I don't think many would write you a letter that say that. So what I think, because I just think they wouldn't write you. They just not bother. I'd like to see some data points. And again, our job is to speak not for ourselves as individuals, but for the public, right? Like what would they be asking if they were sitting here? So I would like to see some comparisons. I mean, ideally, if I were back in business school, I'd be saying those that didn't do anything for 5 or 10 years, it started in 1990, you said?
Yes.
Okay, so 1990, 10, 20, 30 years. So you should have something that says these 5 that didn't have it, have the same attrition, the same retention as these that did it. That would be a bad data point, but you can't cheat on this, right? You have to
Absolutely.
choose and say, you know what? Doesn't show a lot of difference, but we still want to do it. I'm okay with that too. But I think on the sake, for the sake of the public, and when we memorialize why we made a decision that we did, it can't be, we really like it, we're voting yes. That's not how we should be doing it. Actually, we could say that and be done tonight. I just don't think it's a responsible way to behave for anything. And I think you'd agree with that. So
Absolutely.
the comparisons, I look at Maddie because I know that you guys have been talking.
Yeah.
So if they're in there already, that's great. Comparisons, how things work. The financials are going to have to be looked at. And also it's a pension, so it's like an HR, it's sort of a 401, it's sort of a pension. So many places have moved away from pensions, and now this is moving us towards pensions. This entire country has moved away from pension plans to save money. You're asking the board to go into one or a 401 like. I don't know the time that our attorney has, our HR person has, but it seems to me this is a specialty of some sort. And while these guys have done, the men and women, sorry, I don't know if they're all men, but the people have done, I would like to see an actual expert in pensions and benefits actually look at this product and say, this is what it would do. And also look at the financials, which you might be 100% on target. I've just no way of knowing. And I like what you did. You took sort of an average here and sort of an average there. You did the right thing. So very much appreciated.
Thank
I think
you.
it's great. So I'd like to get that point. If the purpose of this is attrition retention, you have to understand that we'd have to have something that says, yeah, that works. Because if you can't have anything that says that actually works, except we feel that it would, we'd have to work that out too. But
Absolutely.
no, the other way would be better. The numbers get very tricky for me. Points for this and points for that. If it were me and I was writing this like with my pen and paper, I would chunk it out into this many years. You vest here, you do this, you move out of New York, you're done. You can't be a firefighter and collect when you're out of New York. This is a volunteer fire department. You have to like chunk things into big categories for me.
Yep.
But if the way this plan is written is that you have to do credits and then you have to take attendance essentially, every single person that shows up, and if they show up late, what does that mean? That is a mathematics nightmare from my perspective. I'm familiar with some of these plans. At their simplest, they're complicated.
Yes.
And then who administers it? who actually administers this?
Right. So just a few call outs. So we solicited for proposals, Firefly, VSIS, and Penflex. Penflex came in by all the others 10,000 cheaper, plus is the most credible. They specialize in
No,
LoSAP
those
only.
are,
That's the
those-
third-party administrator.
those are third-party administrators. Who
Right.
in government administrates this? We
No,
do.
this is all, so Penflex is the third-party administrator we would partner with. There's no contracts involved. And RBC Wealth Management is who we would want to work with our money and management. And they work together and they
Okay.
work at the direction of
I'm
you.
gonna, let me raise the question. I don't mean to interrupt.
No,
you,
it's
but
okay.
I clearly asked it incorrectly. I'm gonna try it. It's my fault. Who in government? So we're government
Mhm.
at the local level. There's a state government, a county. Who in government is responsible that this stuff gets done? Not the third party, not the computer system. And I'm gonna let my colleagues talk because we can have a whole thing. The IT issue is, I'm not sure that's actually done correctly in your, but it's okay. Who's in charge?
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My understanding from a crash course in this over the course of about 48 hours, and then also in speaking with Mr. Aurora, my understanding is that within the department, there would be a LoSAP administrator. I'm not sure if that position would be paid or unpaid, but then certainly that person would have a role with our finance department. It certainly, would be a tag team effort, I believe.
Correct. There's a-
From the governmental end,
Yes,
it is the
thank you.
Board of Trustees.
Mhm.
It's your plan.
Okay.
It's your, I should point something out. Michael hasn't gone into it, and that may be a reason they didn't. You don't need to have an outside TPA. You can have the state run the plan through the controller's office,
Okay.
because there are
State
provisions.
controller's office.
The state controller's office can run the plan. You would still be, it would be a state-run plan, and the state can do that. And you can choose to do that. That can be part of your approval and part of your referendum if you choose to go that way. There's also, and I know, Michael, I don't mean to step on you.
No, it's fine.
there is
It's a
a,
team effort here.
there is a
We work
defined
together.
benefit plan, which is what we've talked about here,
Right.
but there is also a defined contribution plan.
Heard
That's
that.
the other one.
Yeah,
So it can, and again, you'd have to choose which one you want to use.
right.
So
So here's my sort of last question, because I know my colleagues have. And again, thank you for bringing this. I think this is complicated. So
is.
clearly you guys have done, you people have done a lot of work. I heard the first part that once we choose something, but do we buy into plan A, plan B, plan C, whatever? Or is there a lot of flexibility? I don't know why I'm looking used to it, but if there are a lot of flexibility, for instance, it's not a 5-year vesting. We want to go 7-year vesting. It's not this many points, it's that many points. It's only this category of people. The line officers, no, we don't really want that. We want everybody getting the same thing after whatever. Where is the flexibility within the many columns that you recommended
Yep.
based on many months of work? I get that. But where's the flexibility for the board on actually looking at the pieces?
few things. They have to be active members first. Something I sent to Maddie today, which I did not know. We have village employees who are volunteer firefighters. If they get called out to a fire while working, they don't get points for that fire.
Correct.
Because that would be double pay.
Right.
Basically,
They
that's
don't
right.
get credit.
But
That's a
it's-
detail.
Correct.
I tried
But-
not to get into the
But
details
just
of that. yeah.
in terms of what you're saying, and it's Article 11A of the General Municipal Law, there are some areas where, as a board, you could say, instead of 20 years, I want 30 years, or I want to go up to 50 years.
Right.
Or in terms of, basically how you want to shift the points. The 50 points is the 50 points. You're not going to be able to deal
Okay,
with that.
interesting.
That's
Okay.
what it is. The 50 points is that the state has set that, and it's horribly written, not surprisingly, because they have a whole chart as to how you figure it out. But there are certain areas where you can decide, we want to give X number of years here, or there is within that, you can work within that
Correct.
parameter. And again, all of that would have to be in your approving resolution and in the referendum that the voters would have to approve. And just to point out about the voters, and it just.
I know
and
you
I'll
said that
stop.
quickly, but I heard
But
the
the
referendum
important
part.
two things. One, it has to be approved by 60% of this board, which would be 3. So it's a majority here. But the referendum, even though it is the village board, the referendum, as the law provides, is approved by the eligible voters residing within the fire district.
The village.
So but what about the town outside?
So IMA. So we're understanding it's the village only.
I'd have to just confirm that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's true.
I mean, you guys are the experts.
I'm not sure, but I will just say this, it does require a referendum. And any change you make
require.
in years or anything like that, resolution, 60%, new referendum. So the reason you want,
Each resolution requires a referendum.
if you're
as well.
changing
Any change,
LoSAP,
any change to
any
it.
change in LoSAP requires a referendum. And I should just point out from a timing perspective, I mentioned this to Michael
The
before,
general election, I would assume, yeah.
We,
to get on the November ballot,
Mhm.
we would need to have a referendum to the Board of Elections by August 7th. I'm just so you know. And so that's that. If you were to pass it after the first of the year, then you would have to make a determination
Mhm.
as to basically, do they get points for the full year? Or do they get points from when you approve on? That's
Okay.
part of your resolution.
Okay, so that's interesting. I said I was going to ask the last one. There's a lot of detail. So
Yes.
there is the government piece or the public piece that the public will have to understand what they're voting on. We don't just put referendums. First of all, this village, I don't think we put a referendum since I've been. Well, I'm not saying we don't. When was the last time we ever did? Like, people aren't used to it. It's not like a regular thing for the village. We'd have to explain it all. We have to have some expertise on this. Did you, what?
Well, it could be on a school.
No, while the village doesn't do a referendum, that's typically how the school board does.
No,
and
no,
the
I didn't
library
say
board.
we-
Yeah, so.
I'm just saying this board hasn't actually done one. It's not like something people expect of us. In the school, everyone that votes in the school is expecting bond conversations and some referendums, every single election. Here, they're gonna sit there and go, what is this, right? And we can't like pass things that are forever without taking it seriously. It's a little bit, we're in June, July is, so to get it by August 1, I don't think you expected us to be able to do that. So what I can say, like, in concept, this seems like a good idea to me. I get one vote. So in concept, there's a lot of detail and a lot of commitment. So I'm going to pass this on because I think, I'm sorry, did you?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on a few things. Would it be 3 or 4 vote? I mean, 3 or, what you mentioned how many votes,
You said three, they.
Right,
basically
but-
need three.
but one person would not be able to vote, right?
That's correct.
Microphone, please.
Okay, so it's still 3, all right.
It's still 3 out of
And-
5.
And the other part is, I know we talked about forever, but you can dissolve and end it. Just so you know.
I know, in
I know,
theory,
I know.
but I
Um,
have to tell you that dissolving and getting rid is.
I know, I just wanted to make sure that for whoever out there,
Theory.
it can be ended.
Yeah,
Um,
in theory. And the other theory is that the IT people get it right the first time. So that theory has been less than 50% accurate.
Right.
And that, they change and it's this cost. I've never seen our IT budgets actually with the IT people come. And it changes about every 3 years now. It's like your iPhone, every
Yes.
3-4 years you have to change.
If that, 8
And,
months.
and the reason is that they find something better, not because it's a bad thing,
Yep.
okay? But the cost, the operating cost tends to be greater than the startup cost. So I think we're gonna have to, and I don't expect another COVID, but you see what happens when just cost,
Absolutely.
staffing costs, et cetera. There's also the blended time of staff here that has to work on something that we're seeing now. And when I say the first time, I don't mean that as a negative. I'm happy you're here. I think this
Oh,
is very interesting
I'm very happy to
stuff.
be here. I was
Yeah,
very
this is
excited
great.
to come.
It's just that it's not like
That was excitement, not nervousness.
no, I mean, I think this is a great conversation. So let me turn it, I'm gonna start like from my left with Manuel Quesada and see if he has actually, I'm looking at his because he's got the presentation up here. And, let's ask some questions and
Yes,
see
please.
what next steps might be. Sir?
Thank you. You're a natural. So
Thank you.
appreciate that. And it was a very interesting presentation. So thank you. I mean, as the mayor stated, there's a lot more to this, I believe. I mean, you guys been doing this for 8 months, and I'm
Yes.
sure you're more familiar besides those 8 months for years, as you mentioned in the past.
Yes.
I think my concerns are, regardless of which plan or how we're going to put this, it's still a taxpayer's base. As you mentioned, the first year is pretty much just $500,000 plus, and then it kind of goes down for the next years to come. I'm not sure timing is the right time right now for me. Not that I'm against this. I think it's something that we can look into a little bit more, just some more of the details. I know there's going to be another presentation coming from you guys pretty soon as well. Talking about you mentioned a little bit, or you alluded about consolidations, just relocating some of the technology to another. So I know that is coming, and that is also a big project that it may be happening at some time here. To me, as a budget, I'm not sure for me that's going to be this year. We may get all the stuff ironed out. I think, Maddie, you also mentioned the administrative portion of this. And I'm not sure if you answer, Mike, because you have administrative for house and the main administrative itself. Is that a paid person?
So the costs that we went over include any of the fees for the third-party administrator and the wealth management company that would manage the money. Again, based on the roster size, that's all percentages, so it varies with how much we're actually playing with. But no, those positions, the LoSAP administrators would be volunteer positions. It's a volunteer fire department. There would be no salaries involved. So each company would have it's more for our ability, since, as we mentioned, we have 9 companies. We wouldn't want one administrator of the department to have to validate every month, because there's other legalities. It has to be posted at the end of the year for 30 days for people that want to contest it, and so on. So we want, with these administrators and with the biometrics, people can track it monthly. So if there is any disputes or anything, we can stay in real time on top of it. So we avoid any type of audits or grievances at the end of every year. So those would be volunteer positions, because we are a volunteer fire department.
I understand that. And when you said, we'd be creating, that was my concern.
Right.
Because I know we do, the dispatchers do get a salary, not a stipend, or however you want to call it.
Right. They would be volunteer.
And I think regardless, even if the state takes over as administrator, there has to be something that we have to do. Our finances has to look, or at least oversee some of the stuff.
To
we're
that,
doing
to that
here.
point, I have data that I can share that of the municipalities that tried to, or were doing it themselves and have had to get taken over by third-party administrators because they were maybe not passing audits or trying to keep up with it. So all this data I have on what
That's great.
what
Like, just
municipalities
can
needed
you
a third
mention
party.
One municipality that is similar to ours, that you look, just the name, you don't have to go into
Yeah, I
more
can, let me
details.
just look real quick in my. It is, yeah. If you look in the longer version, it says takeover.
Yeah, the board hasn't seen the longer version yet. Yes. I can speak off the cuff just because we've, made a couple calls in the last couple days. Briarcliff, Croton, Tarrytown. Briarcliff is pretty brand new, I think, and then Croton and Tarrytown are 20+ years.
Yeah, but they're smaller communities.
Right, no, but I'm just saying
Yeah.
that the context that we've made so far to
Okay.
try to learn a little bit more. So, and
Does
I think,
Portchester have anything?
Portchester does not have it yet. They're
Not yet.
not yet. No,
Are they working on it?
I can't speculate. I only hear. I didn't verify for myself, so I don't want to speak on it.
I mean, usually Portchester is the one we sort of compare ourselves because of the logistics of how that municipality works. Maybe not in the fire department, because I think they have.
One of the municipalities that we really looked to was across the bridge. I don't have the name of the town. But it's a municipality like us, and it has 8 companies instead of 9. And it was like 99% identical to the way we operate our fire department. So it was very helpful. And then I went with surrounding departments to get a lot of data on which company they used. Did they self-administer, who invested their money? And it was all just coming back to Penflex and RBC Wealth.
Right, that's all I have for now,
Okay,
but I'll have more.
yeah.
Right.
Well, it's a beginning, right?
I-
We weren't expecting.
This was a great beginning,
Yeah,
so.
well, it's great. Thank you. This side? Anyone?
Hi, Mike.
How are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Good.
Good. So I'll start with the money question. Do you have a thought about how the LoSAP program would be funded? Would it require an increase in taxes? Would it require moving money that's currently allocated for one purpose to this? Are there grants that would pay for this? What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are, I don't believe there's any grants that will cover this. I don't know where you would move money from, and I don't know if you would want to increase taxes. I do think I did a little research, and 400,000 would raise the taxpayers about $34 a year, which is about $3 a month. So if that was an ask of the community for their fire service, I want to feel confident that they would support it. Not everybody wants to hear taxes go up, but sometimes for the right reasons, maybe. I would hope that we could find money elsewhere so we don't have to do that. But that's where I defer to all of your expertise, and you know where the money is, right?
Sometimes.
Yeah. So I'll start with just kind of my overall thoughts. That's a helpful response. And recognizing that this is the beginning of the conversation, not the end. It's a large investment, from the ongoing amount to the setup costs. Some of these are eye-watering amounts of numbers, that particularly the kinds of things that they pay for, technology and things. There are just PTSD going all through these tables, as we have experienced other systems for other departments and other things, where we get the sticker price, but then after you look at how much it actually costs, it's a much larger amount. So that's in addition to what the mayor just said, that this is in perpetuity, and it's as a result something to take into consideration. It's tough because I'm balancing this with my love of first responders. As you said, the public very much appreciates and would like to support first responders, and particularly our fire department. 100% volunteer, largest in the state, a lot to be proud of. That is very real. I want to make sure that we stand by that. And I have not yet heard the argument that the kinds of solutions that this would create for the kinds of problems, either current or potential in the future, that we have, that this would be the exact solution, right? So for example, we're saying, hey, enrollment has gone down. We want to make sure that we get as many folks volunteering as possible. The mayor said in one of her remarks that she's not entirely convinced. I similarly don't know. If we sat down and said our biggest challenge is we want to make sure that we get enrollment in the fire department to increase, what are our options? We could do this, we could do LoSAP, we could do whatever. That LoSAP would obviously be the thing that we do. There might be 5 or 6 other things that we do that cost much less and may be more effective. I don't know. I would say that I would start with what are the problems that we're trying to solve, and then back into what are the options to solve those problems. And I would put LoSAP on the table as a potential solution. It's just a big solution that could hit a lot of problems that we have. And so it may be the right one. But it's, it's a lot. So
Absolutely.
I think, agree with my colleague, Trustee Casada, in saying that probably not in the next 4 weeks that I would come to a conclusion that I would be comfortable with saying, let's move forward. But I appreciate this beginning of the conversation to figure out what might we do to make this work, if this is the right solution to the problems, or let's start with what the problems are and saying, what can we do to help solve those problems in a way that may be even more cost effective, even more effective, so that you all are getting what you actually need, your people, your recognition, your, whatever it is. And I say that because we had, for example, I don't know, this was a few weeks ago, we were talking about the tax benefits for retired firefighters, like that kind of thing. We're open to wanting to find solutions that work to recognize the service of our fire department. And we want to do so in a way that is fiscally responsible and makes sense. So that's where my mind is at. The only question I had was in the beginning about that funding piece, which I appreciate your thoughts on there. And with that, I'll let you respond, and then I'll hand it to Trustee White.
Thanks. Absolutely. So unfortunately, how do we measure something like this, right? We can sit here and say it's going to help with retention, it's going to help with recruiting. We don't know until we implement. We can get letters from every chief, and to the contrary, they would not write me letters just to write them. I have 3 letters, and they know that they're going to be used for this. No one would put a letter just for giving me a letter, but they go into depth, and I would love to share them with you because I was asked if I could on how it directly, numbers wise, increased their recruiting and retention. I would say how we can compare that, unfortunately, is we go to a fire call at 2, 3 in the morning. We take some roll call. A year into implementing LoSAP, we look and see if that increased. I mean, that's sadly the reality of it, right? We can speculate and based all the data on everybody else, but every community is different. I know that I haven't seen a negative thing about it, which is good. I haven't seen or talked to anyone. And in fact, in my 8 months of doing the research, 2 other departments are now trying to work on getting their biometrics because of some loopholes that will help with. So I'm right there with you. It's very hard to guesstimate and do all that. And that's where we are. We would be funding something for the very first time based on numbers that we think will make it. I do want to also add that these prices on the technology will not go up. There's room to trim. This is the higher amount of the quotes for the technology, because I didn't want to come in with that issue of, I know how technology is. My son wants a PlayStation 5. Oh, it's $399. By the time you check out, it's $750 because you need all this other stuff.
Right.
I know. So that is the highest where there is room to trim. And as I mentioned also, I don't know if the IT department could help out with 74,000 of that if they have stuff that can work for the servers in our fire departments and stuff like that, where we don't have to purchase it. So this was just covering all the bases to say, Mike, we did all this. We agreed on 417, but now we need another 74 for servers. This is, hey, guess what? We don't need the money for the servers because our IT came through with a Hail Mary and we're gonna save that 74,000 plus the roster. That's
Right.
where the chunk of it is. The variables of the money, to both of your points, is the roster is a big variable, which we're not gonna have major control of until year one, till we see who actually comes out and qualifies. The length, the 20 to 40 years, as Mr. Kahan, did I say it right? Mr. Kahan mentioned. And all of the variables that he touched on are where we can trim and save and come up with the best without, back to the mayor's point, without under trimming to where now we voted in something that needs 3 years from now. What's this gonna do? That every other agency, every other department, inflation, whatever, and it didn't help with retention and recruiting. So
The last thing that I would add, because I'm eager to hear my colleagues' thoughts, is that I'm still looking to understand. So I still am thinking creatively about solutions to the problem. So if the problem is, for example, how can we get more people to volunteer? I would be open to something like, hey, X number of our volunteers are they're younger people and many of them have student loans. How about you come up with a program to forgive $10,000 to $15,000 of their student loans after 10 years of service or 15 years of service or whatever? Then that that they're telling us we've polled our people and they've told us that would get like so many of our friends to get, that would be one of the most impactful things. Or if you would have like a step program so that after a certain amount of years you qualify for this kind of benefit or for whatever, but something that is based more off of here's data that demonstrates here's our people are coming to us because of this. They used to come to us because of whatever. Now they're not. So we need something to entice them. And the people that are coming in, what they're telling us would entice more people is whatever. And so if what they're telling us is, hey, we'd love the promise that if we pay $20 for the next 20 years, then we're going to get, $400 a month for the rest of our lives, then great. Then, but I at this point haven't necessarily heard that this is the solution. The last piece is the defined contribution piece. I also have not heard a ton of details there, and whether that's a large price difference in terms of the contribution for the village. If that works more like a 401k, then the members are contributing and maybe the village administers it or has a match or something like that. And then that amount of money is what they're getting after 20 years, then that could be much more cost effective from the village's perspective, but I didn't get a lot of details there. But thank you.
It's the village's contribution. It's not the employee.
So the village contributes the, whatever amount of money, and then
time there's a payout.
so that money goes into a particular account for that particular person. Got it.
So it's not like a 401k because
There's no contribution by the.
because 401ks, so that slide is a little
I
bit
think the two are
misleading.
flipped, yeah. So it's more the village contributes and then it's a lump sum payout.
So it's like a safe harbor kind of deal.
No,
Or is
it
that
doesn't
different?
sound like it.
No. Okay. I'm way, I don't know.
It sounds like this is a very old system that was used. So it's a straightforward pension,
Yeah.
actually.
Yes. And the
All this
companies,
other, it's like a 401k, it is not. In fact, that would be more interesting if people contributed like the rest of, not government, but everybody else, which is, that your employer, in this case, would be the village, puts in up to 3% or 6%, and you put in 3%, 6%. That was what I was asking about we can actually hear everything. It's all bouncing back, the sound, sorry. That's what I was getting to. What are the buckets of flexibility?
Mhm.
Because that actually gives you, and why does it give you flexibility? Because some employers, for 5 years, depending on their
Mhm.
profits or what the economy was doing, they're like, we're going to match, 1 for 1 up to 10%. Then the economy slumps and they're like, we're going to cut that back to a 3%. Then there's a staffing shortage in the past 2 years. All of a sudden they're back to, we'll do 6%. So it gives you flexibility that all the boats go up to, and it's easier to justify because it's a better business model, but I actually thought that's what the 401k, but now that you've clarified, it's
No, under
actually
the- under
a
the-
straight-on
Under the
pension.
defined contribution, each participant, when they get credit, the minimum contribution is $120 per year of service.
Mhm.
Max is 1,200. So you would, that's what you put, that's what.
But they don't put anything in.
That's
No.
correct.
Right,
It's
okay,
correct.
so
By the
I would
sponsor.
just say that that's the 401k concept
So-
isn't actually accurate, but it's okay. I mean, now we got some clarification. It's,
And the wealth
Fine.
management that we've been working with and Penflex, they're very open to having meetings. So they, all of your questions,
I'm
they can
sure.
answer directly
Yeah.
as well. So,
all right. Thank you.
hello,
Hi, how are you?
good, how are you?
Question, let's say hypothetically, we were to implement this in 2024. You have a lot of people who've already been in the department for many years. Would you go back and retroactively count up their points?
So this is,
Or
a-
do you start at zero?
so this is a great, this is like one of the questions that's on the slide that I thought would come up and it did. So if we do the 5-year buyback, if we approve the 5-year buyback,
Which I'm not quite sure I understand.
so a 5-year buyback means that if somebody's been in the department for more than 5 years, take someone like 20-year member, and we implement this in 2024. 2024, that member achieves their 50 points for 2024. They get that 1 year plus the 5-year buyback, providing that the 5-year look back, they would have made it. So the auditing of that. So in other words, we take the LoSAP plan, we look at all of our numbers based on those members that we have in our headquarters and in our records, and we say, okay, Johnny Smith, he just achieved 2024. He's been a 15-year member, and it's the consecutive 5 years. It doesn't mean within his 15 years that he made 5 years. The law states that it's the 5 consecutive years prior to the years that you implement it. So they would get 6 years. Take it one step further. Somebody's 67 years old. They have 20 years in, 2024 comes, and they go ahead and they achieve 2024, they achieve their 50 points. They now have 6 years. If the 5-year look back deems that they qualified, they start getting $120 a month for the rest of their life. After year 1 with the 5-year buyback.
You call it
So-
buyback.
Because you're buying those years back with your financing it. That's just how they word it. So that's all.
It's pretty misleading.
Yeah, Trustee White, what's important to note also, though, because I think this is maybe where you were going, retired members do not benefit from this. You must be an active member in order to benefit. So a lot of folks who may be retired or whatever,
I know you have an active member in his 90s and he's been doing it for,
an active member.
He's
is
not
a-
active.
is a
but he's not active.
active member, though, and Mike can correct me, it, for this is a fairly elastic term. In other words.
So yeah, so
it's
active
not-
isn't
You don't have
really,
to be interior certified. You just have to, so that it's important to understand that, but you have to be what would be considered an active member. Active member is really not defined anywhere in the law. I mean, it's a lot of court decisions would say what it is and is not. But for this case, a retired member would not count. So
I
you
assume
would
an
have
active member would be somebody actively responding to calls.
has their
and makes
physical,
the
Participating
has-
in all the,
has their trainings up to date, has their physical, because that's all outlined where you must have your physical up to date. You must, everything that deems that you're, I don't know about the word active, we'll just say you qualify to be a firefighter, you meet the criteria of firefighting, and you make your 50 points, you're eligible.
And I'm sorry.
There's no age cap. Somebody could be,
Yeah,
any
can I just
age.
ask a question? Most of the plans no longer do for life. Even the AR1 for teachers doesn't do pensions anymore for life. They stop them now at like 90 something unless you're on the original AR1. New York State is changing that. So this is for life with the average life now being in the 90s. This is for life.
It would be, there is no cutoff. The other thing to note is, and there was a court decision on this, which is why it came up. If you are 65 and still are able to earn years, you must continue to be able to get the years. It has been considered age discrimination. The
correct.
Village of Valley Stream got banged by this in federal court. So if you're in LoSAP and you're 65 and you're able to continue as an active member to get up to, let's say, 40 or potentially 50 years, you You
All
are
right, so
still
that's in the
program,
law. That's also not, I'm trying to understand the fixed
But there's no.
versus variables that we can look at.
Can I just
So-
ask a quick question with regard to the lump sum payment? Isn't that what that is though? So it's like you say you start when you're, 20 years old and say you're allowed 40 years in. So now when you turn 60, you get a lump sum payment and now you're done accruing and the village is done making payments to you. Isn't that correct?
No, you're still accruing.
To my knowledge, I think you're correct, but I would rather the company answer
Mhm.
that. It's a question I could come back with. The reason why there's not a lot of focus on that program is I haven't found anyone doing that program. And I think I may be flip-flopping them, but I think it's a higher risk of investing the money that way. I'm not sure.
I'm sure that there are a lot of details that we'll have to review in doing the thorough analysis on this. So I think we have opportunity to answer that question and other questions as far as what's variable and what's we need to commit to, and also what we can do to make it the best possible, provide the best options for the community and our firefighters for consideration.
Yeah, does anybody else have any macro? I don't
Well,
know, Dana, if you were done.
No, I had one more thought, and it was really an observation, is that I know that we're looking at other investments in the firematic is my new favorite word, by the way. So new firematic investments. But like a new firehouse, consolidating 1, 2 or 3 companies into a new firehouse, which is going to be a lot of money. There's always new apparatus to buy. There's always, things to buy. So I guess we have to look at this in the context of other monies we would be spending for the fire department as well. So I don't.
Absolutely.
And also I was curious. Thank you.
Hmm.
Also, I was curious, last time we did something for the firefighters, the EMT came right in behind them with in government. So is this only fire or EMT? And that doesn't stop anybody else from coming in behind them.
There is
It's,
a separate law relating to EMTs,
Oh.
but the way that's worded, I'd have to get back to you. I don't think it would apply to you because you would have to be the one operating the volunteer ambulance corps.
right.
So that's not, but there is an analogous statute
What,
for volunteer
Okay.
ambulance workers.
what I read was if the fire department was running EMS, they would qualify with a separate section.
Okay, well, that answers that, but I'm sure you do one, everybody else jumps in too. That's, there's the theories and the reality that we've all learned. Okay, macro questions, all good. You got some, I don't know. I feel like we need to read it. We need to ask the questions.
We couldn't put all 8 months into this time right now.
Yeah, no,
I-
I think if you send us, at least for me, if you send me the longer version.
Yeah.
Yes, I
With
think
attachments and everything else with the letters. that'll be-
anything that you want, you can request. If I have it, I'll shoot it right over and I can do
Right.
intros on email with any of the companies. They're more than willing to help, even if we do not decide to go with them, at least get the knowledge. But, I just really want to thank you all. I mean, this is opening the door wherever it goes, it can go. And, I know on behalf of the chiefs, they thank you. On behalf of the members who know I'm here, we all thank you just for hearing. And you mentioned that you do a lot for first responders, especially the fire department. I think it was even mentioned that inspection that you do, and we know it. So I really do appreciate everything, wherever
you.
it goes.
Thank you so
Good
much.
presentation.
Sorry to take so
Thanks,
long.
Mike.
Thank you.
No, perfect. And that's the short version. See how that works?
Thank you very much. Our next agenda item has to do with our intermunicipal agreement with the town of Austin for the provision of water services, which is not changing in any material way. However, we know that we have a sizable commitment coming up, capital expenditure for our new water treatment plant. We know this is a necessary and essential project, and it's estimated to be upwards of $65 million. We have been actively trying to secure grants for this project, and there is a grant that's available. It's called the Intermunicipal Grant. It's administrated by the Environmental Facilities Corporation of New York State, EFC, and we feel that it qualifies. However, there are some requirements to this grant that require a legal binding IMA that really delineates the roles and responsibilities of the municipalities and their financial commitments. And that there's a lead municipality. So in this case, Austin, the Village of Austin would be the lead municipality. We have in anticipation of applying for this grant and hoping that we have a successful competitive application, we have worked very hard, and Stuart's been most helpful redrafting an agreement that we're able to put in some of the language that's required specific to our current agreement and how it applies to the construction of the new plant. So as we know, the town of Austin for many, many years, since really, I think the 1960s, has been paying 50% more for water than the Village of Austin. That's an important point because part of the reason that that was done that way was because for infrastructure costs, and that is the way the town pays for infrastructure related to the distribution of water. The other significant financial agreement commitment between the town and village was that in 2016, both the town and the village agreed to a 5% annual increase to the water rate for all water rate payers, town and village, in anticipation of the new plant coming online and making sure that we would have the finances for it. So there is a financial commitment, and there is a financial commitment born from the town. While the water treatment plant will be paid out of the village water fund, which is funded by town and village water rate payers, the town contributes to that fund through the 50% additional amount that they currently pay and the 5% annual increase that we have instituted since 2016. We feel that this meets the criteria based on the town's ability to actually make a contribution that would be meaningful. Their water fund would be subject to the tax cap, so that would prohibit them making any sizable one-time capital investment. They really couldn't do it in a fiscally responsible way. So we've worked out the language, and we think that we have a fair shot of meeting the criteria required by the EFC. We think that this absolutely meets the spirit of an intermunicipal agreement that is to consolidate the provision of services from the government, and we are very hopeful that we do this. I just want to caveat that from time to time, we have talked to the town about the rate differential. This IMA in no way prohibits future discussions about how much more the town pays. It does identify that they will not be paying more than 50%. And it also, as far as the annual rate increases, really, those discussions are subject on a much greater understanding than we currently have on what this is going to cost us, and whether we get $30 million or not will also have a significant impact on what people can pay. So we have redrafted this. I've had conversations with the town supervisor, and we'll be meeting with their village board too. We're also sharing this IMA with EFC. They want to see it before it's signed to make sure it checks off their boxes. But again, the purpose of this is to really reestablish the IMA specific to how it currently works without changing everything, without closing any doors to future renegotiations of the terms, but making sure that we are doing this in the spirit of an intermunicipal agreement that satisfies the requirements of the grant. Does anybody have any questions?
Nobody read it? Okay.
Covered it. Just very briefly, obviously, it wasn't that early today, sure. I didn't see anything crazy, I want to say. Everything was what you just explained. I don't have a problem with that. I think that I'm curious to see how much the plan is going to be itself. And maybe maybe moving forward, I think we may have to have a different discussion in regards to percentage, the water rates, and how much the town contributes to that. But I think at this point, I will agree with those terms right now. So,
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, sorry, Dana.
No, I was just gonna say, I
Sorry.
appreciate you guys, really jumping up and getting this done, because it could really, to get this grant would pay for about half of the plant. So I appreciate your flexibility and your agility in doing this. And here's hoping for the best.
Thank you.
So I understand that it's it had to be done for a grant, but it also, I think, does bind us because we're saying things in there. It's not whether we get the grant or not, it's still binding. I didn't see anything that looked like anything different, and I think the supervisor was also in the conversation at some point. So hoping for the best. These grants, people think we have years to work on them. So many of these grants, we get 30 to 60 days by the time they land on our desks, so to speak. So let's hope for the best. And yeah, we're going to have more conversation about the water plant in the future. Okay.
Just one consideration, and this is, I'd spoken to Supervisor Feldman about this as well. So we have been basically amending the last time this IMA was formally redrafted was in 2002. So it's been some time. We've been amending it and rolling over. So nothing has materially changed since then, although some things that were in the original IMA don't exist anymore, but the terms basically have stayed the same. The original grant in or not the original one, but the 2002, the agreement was drafted for 15 years. We have been advised by EFC that they would like to see a long-term agreement. However, we can put it for any amount of time, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, probably 10 to 15 years is going to satisfy the grant requirements. That does not mean though, however, what we put in the language too is that this will be reviewed annually and that the rates can be evaluated annually. So even if we were to do it for a 10-year time, the language does not bind us to, if we decided to have the conversation about the differential within the next year or two. It doesn't bind us to that. So it just binds us to really the roles and responsibilities, which would not change over time.
And I apologize, maybe I missed that. Is that part of the draft that you guys send us this?
Yes. I mean, I think we leave it in brackets.
What's
but,
the wording? Yeah, because
the
that's
term
right,
of,
because in the parentheses, you left it blank.
Yeah,
actually.
so that we were,
Okay.
yeah, so
Right,
we
so we
were,
should be
so
doing
that's
that.
it's subject to.
Okay.
So I think that Stuart and I were talking about it. We are going to be sharing with the EFC. So I think we would recommend going with their guidance on that, because that would guarantee that we would be checking a box that they would want to see checked. But again, the way it's written is whether it's written for 5 years or 15 years, it's still subject to annual review in terms of the rate scenario.
So how are we filling those blanks in? You're gonna go to them and ask them what their recommendation is?
Correct.
And this 1 year, what is the wording on it? That we shall review it every week or we might review it? Because those two words
Shall
keep giving us a big headache.
Reviewed annually by the village and town. That's all it says. The aforementioned percentage will be reviewed annually by the village and town.
Okay, so that means that every year we will have to review it rather than a wording that says we may review it.
Just says you'll review it. That's all it says.
So, and I think that's actually a really good thing to put in regardless, because one of the things we found with a 15-year IMA is that 20 years could go by and you're still, so knowing that you have to look at it, I think is part of our overall objective to apply more rigor to the IMAs and more consistency in the way they're written. And the
I know,
way
it's just that annual the year passes so quickly. You got 52 weeks, 2 weeks we don't meet. Half of the time it's work session, half of the time it's legislative. It's actually not a lot of time to deal with a big topic like that. I just think a year will pass very quickly is all I'm saying. So I just, those words get us in text amendments. We continuously get in trouble when we say will or shall rather than may or might.
One of the things I think
So-
is important, because based on conversations we've had in the town previously, I think as part of our budget discussion, really understanding the impact of the IMAs is something that we probably should be looking at in context of our budget decisions. So with being able to track what we're doing and everything, what we hopefully do is as part of budget season, really look at that. And not to make these exhaustive discussions. But if there was to be a substantive discussion with the town and village about the rate, it would behoove us to be able to do that in anticipation of budget season, knowing that we have exactly the analysis that we need going, tracking what's being done, what's going to be happening in the future, what's happening, because I think that's a part of the equation that had been missing and why a lot of discussion stalled on this topic. So I understand that it may add a bit of extra work, but I think if we do it in conjunction with the budget, will ultimately be better for it, because I think we'll give everybody a much better understanding and much more comfort level with what the IMAs, why we have them, and why they're set up the way they are.
Okay. Well, let's hope we get this grant. And if we don't, we're going to have different budget discussion.
We are applying for another grant too, which I think we more clearly meet the criteria, and that's a $10 million grant. So both are due on July 28th. So we're working to get
One
both of
doesn't
those in.
supersede the other, because usually these grants, you get one, you sort of don't get the next. The other one.
They're two
two
different
different agencies?
agencies.
Okay.
So, and we're working, again with our, we have, I do want to just recognize publicly that we've been working with Assemblywoman Dana Levenberg, our Senator Pete Harcum, as well as Assemblyman Steve Otis on this, to really underscore the importance of the funding for an infrastructure project like this, particularly given the, we do have census tracts that would qualify as environmental justice. 12
Yes,
census
I saw
tracts.
that- Yeah, I couldn't understand where the 12 was. Sing Sing prison was penitentiary, sorry, was mentioned as one of the 12. And then I sat there and said, well, do we have to list the other 11, and where are they and what are they? Are they even important to know about?
Essentially, they're all within the village, not within the town. But the important thing is to demonstrate that they are within the service area of that would be serviced by the new plant.
Okay.
And the fact that the cost of this plant will be borne by the ratepayers who predominantly live in those,
In the village.
in the village. So I think that those are points that really resonated with our legislators, and we're hopeful that they will continue to resonate with the powers that be, so that we will be considered for this opportunity. So the next items on the agenda,
Hello, Valerie.
I'd like to welcome Valerie Monastra.
I think Valerie should get her own nameplate at this point.
I think so. So Valerie's going to be talking about two topics. So in the interest of time and not wasting any, she will be talking to us tonight about cannabis micro business zoning, as well as she'll be reviewing maps for the general business district for South Highland Avenue zoning. So with that, turn it over to Valerie.
So I'll start with I think the cannabis is the first on the agenda. So the last time I was before this board, we talked about, we're focusing right now just on the micro businesses, specifically dealing with the licenses for cultivator licenses, processing licenses, those licenses, not retail. So we talked about identifying, we talked about potentially having these types of businesses in your more industrial areas, which are the institutional redevelopment district, as well as the planned waterfront districts, which was the PWA district. And when we were looking at the concept of incorporating this, because I think the last time I was here, I mentioned that you don't really have anything that allows for growing indoor facilities for cannabis, but you do have specific uses within these districts that allow for warehousing, allow for distribution, allow for light industry. So when we actually looked at the zoning districts and what's permissible, what we found was that it would really nicely be able to, if we established a new use under the industrial use groups, and we're proposing to call it cultivation grow facilities. And this would be basically all encompassing term for facilities specifically operating under like a nursery or cultivator licenses for cannabis, but could ultimately be used for other other grow industries as well in the future. Associated with typical nursery cultivator licenses are also potentially light manufacturing and warehousing, and those would also be permitted as part of the zoning districts that are currently there. So what we found is that you don't necessarily have to create a whole nother, zoning district, nor do you have to create a new like chapter within your village code in order to incorporate these uses into your zoning. And so what we're proposing to do as part of adding it to the industrial use group, cultivation grow facilities, and they would be a conditional use in both the IR and the PWA zoning districts, which are,
Those like in
yes.
the-
Planned Waterfront A and the institutional redevelopment zoning district.
Where is that?
So the IR right now is basically your Sing Sing facility. The PWA is Sing Sing. Yes.
Listen, I think it's great if they start down in their basement. That would be perfect for why cannabis was originally, passed. That would be very symbolic, and they could make a few bucks.
And also the PWA, which is in the northern industrial area down by the waterfront, which you have, your Castle Plumbing was there, your Brander Fill Factory around that area. And so what we are proposing to do is add, again, the cultivation grow facilities already within those two zoning districts. Light manufacturing, warehouse, and freight movement are also conditional uses. So they would tie part and parcel with what would also be in conjunction with this type of cannabis grow facility. In addition, your zoning text already specifically has provisions that focus on industrial standards, specifically dealing with noise, air, light. So what we did was we went through and added some additional criteria in terms of security, emergency access plans that the planning board can request during review. We also specifically noted about having a representative of the business who shall be available 24 hours a day in case there are issues with the business, of the police department needs to, or building department needs to contact them. And then also specifically focusing, having more purview for the planning board dealing with any heating systems or heat inducing or grow lighting, which would typically be found in those types of grow facilities. And then specifically dealing with additional lighting, so to prevent encroachment onto neighboring properties. But for the most part, your zoning chapter already has a lot of other items taken care of and already identified in the industrial use group that would prevent from some of the other nuisances from taking place, dealing with noise and smell, and as well as vibrations or other those types of nuisances related to industrial uses.
So in simple English, we already have something for light. It's really it's really one zone, because one is the penitentiary, which is state
Yes.
property. So we have no influence. They would have to make that decision, not us. So it's one area. Does that include Westerly and Quimby, that area? That big red brick building?
That's I think that's the plan. That's the PW.
So that's the RDD.
Yeah, that's the RDD once it's west of the
Okay.
railroad tracks.
So it's pretty limited.
Yes, it is.
Okay,
And it was specifically identified by this board last meeting as being probably the most appropriate location for these types of uses within the village. Yes.
Okay. And do we have anybody that's actually interested in this? Like, I know this conversation started because there were people interested.
There was somebody interested for this type of facility. I mean, we have recently received a phone call on retail, but that's a separate matter. But so there is now interest starting to be generated a little bit.
And they need a different type of license, correct?
That's correct.
And you can't be a cultivator and a seller in the same company, is that,
We are not suggesting that. No,
you're not suggesting?
we are
what?
not recommending that at this point.
Okay.
You're saying in the state law.
I thought the state law says you can't be vertically integrated, that you can't be the producer, then the curator, then there was like this whole thing about you can't be vertically integrated.
That very well might be the case. I don't have that answer.
Okay, the
Do you
zoning though
have
doesn't
that,
affect it.
Stuart?
Okay.
There are some circumstances where one can service the other. I don't know if it, with the
Oh.
cultivator, I think the cultivator has to, they're all separate licenses, but whether the cultivator can also sell at the same location. They may be able to have a dispensary as associated with it, but they're
Mhm.
separate licenses.
If I
Okay.
remember, I think it, because the conversation was around distribution and consumption. And I think the idea was that you couldn't have both.
That's
Okay.
different.
But this is cultivation, which
Right,
is a
it's
step
different,
before. It's
yeah.
different.
Right.
So you could be
Okay.
a cultivator, yeah.
But
Okay,
you
okay.
could theoretically, as a cultivator, you could ask to have processing or warehousing or distribution all in the same facility. So that's,
Okay.
and those would be, we specifically highlight those as being additional like principal uses. So it's not necessarily.
You're just
don't-
adding that
Right.
to what already exists if somebody want to do plumbing or whatever,
Right.
right? Which or glass, whatever was there before.
Right.
Okay, questions,
um,
comments?
I do have a-
Manny?
Thank you. So, it was always a struggle, from 2009 to now, a couple years back in regards to some of the stuff that happened on the zoning map itself, especially for their just had it, the PRD zone, which is
Right.
next to the prison in a way, sure. There's a big commercial spaces in there, office spaces, office that actually do not meet the criterias of what the planned residential district kind of reflects. I was wondering if you looked into that, because a lot of the zones is like that. If you look, there's different sections within our map, sure, that have that section on
Right.
that, from north to south, I want to say. Does that make any sense? Because they're very industrial as well,
You mean the PRD?
the PRD itself.
So the PRD zone, I mean, a part of that, I mean, some of the PRD zones are very close to your multifamily or residential areas. I mean, we can look at other districts. The one thing about one reason why we identified this district right off the bat is that some of the other primary uses that would go into for example, like the warehousing or processing or light manufacturing are already permitted in these districts. So you wouldn't necessarily be changing the
So much
nature
of
of the
that.
district itself.
Oh. All right. I mean, obviously prior to 2009, you probably know this better than we do. Portion, the one that I'm talking about specific is obviously on the Sparta portion of it, right next to the Sing Sing prison itself.
Right.
The PRD itself, it wasn't really meant to be residential. It just changed to a residential portion, and I think that was the biggest struggle. So that's the reason why it's more like a light industrial section in there.
Right.
That sort of could potentially be used for something like this as well, if is allowed in there.
Right. So I think in the PRD right now, it wouldn't be allowed. It's something that, I would almost say that that's something that the village might want to look at in carving out some of those properties that have that industrial use. I mean, but I assume you're talking about where the Tesla Craig site used to be, right? So, I mean, ultimately, if those areas never develop into anything more and or just remain business, that's something that, the village could look at in terms of turning that area into a business district or,
But not right now.
right.
Okay. Good
Thank you.
questions. What are we doing? Thumbs up, thumbs down, 3 thumbs up? Where are we moving with this? This is just adding to existing, correct? You get 1 thumb. We don't-
Next would be you'd have a resolution of referral
up
to
to
the
3.
zoning board. You have a resolution of referral, excuse me, to the planning board because it's a text change. Planning board would come back and give you their recommendation. You would then hold a public hearing and you would be able to then amend it. You would
Okay.
also send it to the county.
So, sorry, one last question. This is more regards to a lot of definitions.
Yes.
Adding to that.
Yes. So we do have,
August 9th,
yes.
August 9th, your
and-
work.
and we do,
Your work session, August 9th is solely devoted.
solely
to
the, and Stuart.
Out of coffee that day.
Yes. Yeah, and Stuart does have, everything is drafted. So it is
Great.
done,
Thank you.
Stuart is in the
And
process
what
of
Stuart
reviewing
likes
the
to do is
draft.
send memo saying looks very good. I just have a few questions.
Right. So
It's
we
a
gotta,
whole thing.
right, we gotta get through that and then, then we'll,
But
when everything is
August, the
drafted,
plan is
yes.
August the 9th. We have a whole slew of things.
so,
Gotcha.
I mean, so theoretically, if this, we can decide when you want to incorporate, well, we wanted to have this sectioned off, but ultimately this would get worked
Okay.
into that.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
The second item is the general business district. This is if you recall, there was a petitioner looking to potentially add residential uses to the GB district. And this board wanted to take a look at what are the current uses within the GB district.
This is the Arcadian. What are we talking about?
No, this
Highland
is
Avenue.
South
South
Highland,
Highland.
yes. I don't know if, I believe everyone received a map. I don't know if we have it is it something that can show?
Jamie, it's in the email that I sent on Friday, if you want to pull it up.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
She doesn't have a microphone.
Sorry, I'm usually loud enough. The email that I sent to the BOT on Friday afternoon, Valerie's second memo that has to do with the GB district, if you could pull that up on the screen, please.
Was I included on the email?
Yes.
Okay, give me just a second. I'm sorry, I was working on the air quality issues. Give me just a moment.
So I can start talking. The map that you will see, there are a couple areas within the southern district that really have a few residential uses. So one area is specifically for the properties that were, being petitioned. There's another area along Revolutionary Road that has a number of 2-family and single-family residential houses. But then the rest of the district itself is primarily commercial, dealing with either motor vehicle sales, restaurants, and just general commercial or mixed commercial uses. And I think just scroll down the very next page. Yep, there it is. So to the left are the uses north of the north section of the GB district. That's on North Highland Avenue. And then the right.
Just give me some. key
Sure.
points So I know where we're talking.
So in the north, this is specifically where the red is where Brandon Furniture is. So that's the GB district
Okay.
around that area. And then in the south, the bottommost, and that's on the right map, the bottommost parcel is the CVS parcel. And then moving up from there, where you have on the South Highland Avenue, you have a few of the yellow and the orange, and that's the properties in question currently. And then the other section where you see yellow, and that's, again, the residential uses, that's along Revolutionary Road. The red is commercial. The purple is motor vehicles and sales and services. And
That's like Capelli's over there?
yes,
That's 2 lots?
right. And it could also be gas, and it's also gas stations as well.
Okay, got it.
And then the pinks are your mixed commercial uses. So some of your buildings that have multiple commercial uses with operating within them. And these are based upon your property tax codes.
So what are we discussing?
So the question that the board wanted to see what the surrounding uses were. And then I think to consider a little bit more whether you want to amend the zoning, the GB zoning district to allow for residential uses. And if so, we can talk about, potential
All of
some
those,
parameters.
all the colors.
It's right. So the colors, it's all the yellows, and what you're seeing like looks like white and orange are your residential uses, either multifamily, 3-family, 2-family, or single family. And all the reds, purples, pinks, those are all your commercial uses.
So the text amendment changes all of that.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. We could decide, right, the board could decide how to limit, the amount of residential that would be permissible. Currently the residential uses that are there are probably pre-existing non-conforming uses. So ultimately, those would then be potentially permissible uses, assuming that those properties meet the criteria that ultimately gets established. I think the board was concerned whether GB was an appropriate area for residential. And you can also look at sectioning off like your residential uses for just the southern section versus the northern section. There's also, what they have, they call it a term like threshold zoning, where you could say, maybe allow residential uses up to a certain percentage of like the properties within the area. You can also set residential uses for certain size properties. So there's a number of different there's a lot of flexibility that you can, but I think the first step is just trying to determine whether you want to allow residential within the GB district.
Comments? Or anybody?
I don't, Valerie, and I don't remember exactly the criteria that that particular project was looking for. If let's say if we go, because there was some criteria that they define as part of their proposal, sure.
Right.
If that's the case, for argument's sakes, how many of these properties will have
Right.
the opportunity to do the residential and then the retail on the bottom?
Right. So based upon the criteria they were putting forth, approximately 40% of the properties were going to be eligible. And they were specifically proposing that all properties, as property owners proposing to permit a conditional use mixed use development for all properties adjoining residential districts in 2 or more sides.
Right. Anybody have anything to say? Are we changing? Are we changing with caveats? Are we leaving as is? I guess those are the 3 options, yeah?
And if you decide to change with like potential caveats, we can come back with caveat options for the board to consider, right? That doesn't have to be decided tonight. But this would just be just an idea of whether you want to continue looking at the zoning text changes to this particular district to allow for residential uses.
Right. Anybody?
And this is basically comes from a request by a property owner who owns 3 lots on which there are houses,
That's correct.
Wants to build them that.
would like to tear them down and build an apartment
He didn't
building.
say tear them down. I think he said that he wants to just triple by 2-3 times what there is now. I mean, that's what he would like. Doesn't mean he won't settle for less. That's, I think it went from 3 to 11 or something like that, right?
Well, the number of units, but I think he is planning to demolish the buildings and then build a new building.
And then we had a conversation about the drawings and how that, and they said, oh, it's just a rendering. Don't worry about it. It's the same thing. Okay.
Well,
Anybody?
I mean, I've said in the past that I think you're opening Pandora's box of redevelopment there.
Right, so my comment is very consistent. This doesn't change it. And I have driven on that property. There's also a lot of parking, by the way, of vans and trucks
Yes.
in the back there, more than I've ever seen. And there's a garage that's been turned into something else, because now I've actually stopped and driven on and looked at, not driven on, I went actually from Capelli's, you could see it. That's another story, by the way, what's going on at Capelli's. So I'm very consistent, and why I said that is, for me, a very commercial environment. It has nothing to do with the argument of what goes on across the street, but it's the 6-foot bushes and the parking in the back and how that whole concept. So I didn't buy into that. And I do not think that I do not think it's safe, and I don't think it's necessary. So for me, I'm staying consistent. 40%, it's a lot to have to change. Even, I know we can add caveats, but now you're starting with too many footnotes, and for me anyway. So that's where I am with this. Anybody else want to say anything, or?
I would definitely like to see something come back with caveats.
Okay, we need majority to give direction. Otherwise, Valerie's going to keep staring at us. Valerie doesn't know what we want her to do. We have one with caveats. We have two that say consistent with what was said last time. And then we have two people that haven't said anything yet.
I'm with you, Mayor, and you, Trustee White, where I'm consistent in what I said last time.
I'm gonna abstain for any other conversation because it means nothing. At this point, you have the majority. I'm actually with Bob. I would like to see some sort of caveats, but that's not the majority of the board, so we go from there.
Okay,
I want to state very clearly that I went through 3 renditions of asking people to comment. So I appreciate that a majority then rules, but everybody had an opportunity from get-go to say what they wanted to with this new information. That being said, you have a 3, so you have sort of direction. Anything changes, let us know.
Okay,
But right now, that's where we are.
okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Valerie. Our next item on the agenda, so I think that the board will remember that we had gotten 2 program grants for the Youth Bureau that were awarded in December by the county. One was for the they were both Invest in Kids programs. One was for the safety swimming program that started in February, and that's been running successfully since, and that's to provide access to make sure that all children in our community have access to swimming lessons and water safety. And then there's also the program Austin Youth Engaged in Success. This program was originally supposed to be run in partnership with the library and housed at the library. And the county had some issues with that. So our Youth Bureau Director Chima has been working on this to get this program running. We certainly don't want to lose any time. The program will start in early July, and it will be run at the community center because the library is not an option. We were working on running it at the school district, and then there were a lot of changes at the school district. So right now it's going to be starting at the community center. Everything is county's happy with everything. Everything's happy. However, we need now to sign the contract. So the village commitment for each of these programs, I believe they were 50% match, but it was, oh, I'm sorry. It was a 35% match rather. So we'll be getting for the swim safety program, water safety program, we'll be getting about $75,000 from the total. County is contributing 49,000, and we'll be contributing 26,000. And then similarly for the Austin Youth Engagement and Success, which is a middle school academic program. The total funding is almost $77,000, and the county will be contributing $50,000, and we'll be contributing about almost $27,000. So, and they're 3-year contracts.
You see my face, right? I'm about to ask.
Yes, I'm sorry.
We have gone
Yeah.
screwed a little bit with county.
So these are 3-year contracts, and these are
That's
the
great.
annual numbers. So
We'll budget for them.
Yes, so they are budgeted. There are no budget implications, but we will have a resolution next week to authorize me to sign those contracts and get them done.
So I just want to say that I didn't know where this whole youth bureau thing was going to go. But in our last meeting, it was nice. I think they said 90 kids are in the swim program. So Karen was also at the meeting. Were you on the call? No, not you, Bob, actually. Were you've been on one call with the youth, but you weren't on the last one. Okay. So, because some people zoom in. So that's huge. There's such, I mean, I know more than I need to know about pools and the shortage of lifeguards. They're not just jobs. They're also, we live on the Hudson, good for people to know how to swim. It's not cheap to take swim lessons and do them well. It's not cheap to get CPR courses and life-saving courses and lifeguard courses. So this is great. It's a great use of the pool. It's a great community thing. Very excited that 90 kids were there. I wanted to say 96, but I feel that's not right. I feel it was 90. It's a big number. It's a big number. They're young kids. They're not like older teenagers, but you got to start somewhere. This is all really good. And some of the other programs, there were 5 key programs that were discussed. Let me put a pitch in. If anybody hears this on video or my fellow trustees, Grandpas United looking for more grandpas. You do not actually have to be a grandpa. You just have to be a person of a certain age. So you don't have to be somebody's, and in fact, I had suggested I was going to speak to my synagogue about that. Just anybody you know, they're really looking for people. And the program's doing really well, and it's it's actually a very highly recognized program. So this is cool. So the youth bureau is actually growing, but I do think it's one of these things where there's a big pie in the sky concept. I'm looking at you, Karen, because the budgets are going to go, they start flying, and all these grants are great, but it's like, 2 to 1, 3 to 1, 1 to 1, and it adds up very quickly. So we'll keep an eye for the budgets, but very excited about it. And it's, we'll see where it goes, but I'm glad we're going forward with it, and we'll be doing some of the other stuff with the community center. What else we got?
That concludes our meeting, our agenda for tonight.
Okay. So that's it. Are we adjourning? We're going to do legal. Okay, so we're adjourning for just advice of counsel. Ladies and gentlemen, I guess we have to vote. Anybody want to make the
So
motion?
moved.
Anybody want a second? Thank you. It is 9:32, I think. Have a really great evening. Have a wonderful July 4th. Enjoy all the festivities, local and everywhere else. And have a great evening. Adjourned. Get to use my hammer.